Welcome everyone to a new episode of the new playlist Projects in Patristics. I'm very happy to welcome with us Dr. Sara Contini. She is a prime fellow at the Philologisches Seminar at the University of Tübingen and in collaboration with the Sapienza University of Rome. Her project is called GraFiE, Gratia and Fides, Intercultural Exchange between Greek Christianity and Roman Political Discourses. And she started this project as a fellow at the Accademia Vivarium Novum e Fondazione Roma in Rome. And she has now 2 more years to go on her project, and she's going to talk with us today. So, Sarah, can you give us a brief overview of your project?
Sure. So, GraFiE, which is my project, investigates how two key concepts, which are fides, which means trust but also faith, and gratia, which means favor but also grace, are expressed in Latin Christian prose works that translate or to a different degree rework a Greek hypotext. I treat these Latin translations or reinterpretations as places of cultural exchange, not only between Greek and Roman Christianity, but also between the language of the socio-political language and terminology of the Roman ruling class and the new emerging Christian message. I chose specifically to focus on Fides and Gratia because these are markedly relational terms, describing the social bonds that regulate the functioning of the Roman elite, but also describe the special connection between the Christians and their God. Fides and Gratia are relatively well codified signifiers in the Roman political discourse. In the sense that gratia is the disposition of mind whereby all decent, honest Roman men are bound to return a favor or a gift. And fides is the trust that a fellow decent Roman man, good Roman man, will indeed honor this obligation. Fides and Gratia are part of a system of interconnected values that demonstrated remarkable resilience throughout various social, political, and religious change. Despite the fact that the Roman Empire was in many ways a heterogeneous entity, Fides and Gratia must have had a recognizable and identity-forming meaning for the Roman ruling class. Later, with the advent and then the triumph of Christianity, new meanings were mapped onto these signifiers and their scope widened. Gratia was used also to express the concept of God's free gift to all human beings, and faith and fides, the trust that a commitment to Christ will be rewarded with salvation. In this sense, Fides and Gratia, in a way, surpass the rigid expectation of reciprocity within a specific group and transcend this meaning on the grounds of God's superabundant love for all his creatures, expressed mainly through the incarnation of the Son, but also, which is very significant to the text that I studied in the first part of GraFiE, through the beauty and usefulness of the visible creation. GraFiE thus aims to evaluate the role played in this semantic shift of Fides and Gratia by the practice of translation. Fides and Gratia are thus used in GraFiE to reveal the ways in which Latin Christian authors, on the one hand, reject traditional value systems as pagans, but on the other hand, use the familiar language of describing social bonds to convey a Christian message that is in at least in part based on a Greek input to a new Roman audience, often with the aim of directing public opinion or the sentiment of their specific community to a specific objective, may it be theological, doctrinal, polemical, didactic, exegetical. So, in this way, the role of the Latin mediator is really centered in GraFiE as an active agent and not just a passive receiver or communicator. From a methodological standpoint, I only compare Latin text whose Greek hypotext is at least in a substantial part extant. Otherwise, obviously, a linguistic comparison would be very difficult. In particular, the pilot of the project focuses on Basil of Caesarea's Hexaemeron, composed around 377. Its early 5th century Latin translation by an otherwise unknown Eustathius, and the Hexameron by Ambrose of Milan, composed around 387, which not totally, but at least in some parts, partly works as a translation. The project presents a structured database of occurrences of Fides and Gratia and their cognates. Each occurrence is tagged for sense, function, and alignment to the Greek hypotext, be it a strict rendering, a nuanced shift, or a distinctly Latin addition. That bird's eye view that the database in GraFiE allows to detect patterns instead of doing just an anecdotal reading of occurrences, detect patterns in the way the Latin interpreter chooses to interact with the language of faith and grace in the comparison with the hypotext. For examples of the findings that this approach can allow are distinctive aspects, for example, of Eustathius' translation technique. If, on the one hand, Eustathius was a fairly literal translator, we can observe that he sometimes adds further qualifications to the language of faith and grace, especially in polemical or doctrinal context. These additions can be just simple adjectives, whereas, for example, grace can be specified as heavenly grace. So, if on the Greek we have charis, we can say specify that this is heavenly grace. Or they can be solemn insertions that go towards a dogmatic understanding. For example, if Basil says, our mystery, Eustathius expresses in full as the ineffable mystery of our Catholic faith. These are just examples. Instead, for Ambrose, we can see that in his use of faith and grace, he combines Basilian exegesis with poetic, scriptural, literary suggestions, and his own sensitivity to the beauty of creation, which is celebrated in Ambrose both by itself and as a revelation of divine philanthropy. In this sense, the perception of the gratia of nature functions for Ambrose as the motive, the presupposition for the basis of Fides. So we can say that GraFiE, to summarize the hypothesis that is on the basis of GraFiE, GraFiE hypothesizes that the study of the practice of Latin translation of authoritative Greek Christian text may help to shed light on the cultural program devised by intellectuals such as Ambrose to create a specifically Roman Christian identity, implemented through the hybridization of traditional sensibilities and values conveyed by the language of Fides and Gratia, and a careful selection of Greek theological findings.
And what do you think are the possible benefits for the academic community that the projects would bring?
Well, the first opportunity that I see in GraFiE, not just for my project, but in general for our studies, is a methodological perspective. In the GraFiE database, each occurrence of Fides and Gratia is tagged by several labels. So, where, which indicates the Greek locus in Basil, Latin, Greek, meaning, which is I created a series of labels based on the definitions of the Thesaurus Linguae Latina. So, for example, devotion and credibility for faith.
Mhm.
Sample, and this I would like to say a bit more, the labels that I assign to each sample, which is that if the text is a strict translation, so caris gratia pistis fides, or where there is a nuanced shift in the translation. So, for example, what I said before regarding Eustatius, our mystery, the mystery of our Catholic faith. So, if the discourse in the Latin text follows the structure and the meaning of the Greek text, but we can observe some shifts in the usage of Fides and Gratia. If, or another type of sample is if the passage including Fides and Gratia is not found in the Greek text.
Mhm.
For example, if it's an addition by Ambrose, or if Fides and Gratia is found in a quotation from scripture. These are all the various samples, so A plus, B, and C. And finally, the purpose of the text, so whether this specific passage has a specifically didactic, pastoral, or polemical purpose. Of course, every text has more than one function, but the main function of that specific portion of text, including Fides and Gratia. And I finally also include as an English translation, which is as literal as possible. This structure can help to bring to light pattern-based arguments that other scholars can replicate or challenge. For example, colleagues may apply this, the structure of the GraFiE database to possibly all studies of the relationship between a later text and an earlier text that the later text reinterprets, reworks, translates. And this is what I would imagine could be the contribution of GraFiE to from a methodological standpoint to the study of translations and reinterpretations. The second part is more about the contents of GraFiE, which is to bring attention to the reception of Roman social political lexicon in in Christian text. This interaction between the traditional language of Roman values and Christian context is, in my opinion, still understudied, and so I hope that my project can bring further attention to this topic that I'm personally really interested in. So these are the two main contributions that I envision.
And I think they're a really good one. Maybe only one question I have. When do you know when the database will be available?
Well, ideally by the end of 2026, it's now hosted on the Airtable platform, and I plan to share it in a form that allows users to comment on it. In a way, we can hopefully foster collaboration between scholars and maybe build together a texture of values and their interpretation in Latin Christian text. So not just I now work on Fides and Gratia, but we can do also something about Justitia, Pietas, etc.
Excellent. That would be great. And what do you see as the main future developments of your project?
Well, the most natural next step is to expand the corpus to other translations where we have a comparable Greek hypotext. I don't want to say Greek original, but a comparable at least Greek hypotext. And because the idea is that once the GraFiE database has been populated with enough records, we can do both a quantitative analysis that in this sense can be helped by large language models. For example, which adjectives, nouns, verbs occur more often in association with Fides and Gratia, which of course, if one has 30 records in the database, you can just look at it, but once you have 400, it's helpful to use also these tools. And this type of analysis, for me, it's really significant because it can help us build a verte texture of all this vocabulary of Roman Christianity. On the other hand, also a qualitative analysis will be possible, especially with more records that come from different genres, different periods. Like, for example, if we look at Dionysius Exiguus, so in the middle of the 6th century, so after the 4th century, and there in his translation, we can also create a diachronic assessment of how this vocabulary of Roman Christianity develops over time and which changes, which integrations happen.
Well, Sarah, I cannot but thank you for presenting your project with us today. And I really hope, I'm really looking forward to see your database and next development. So
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
bye.